Hello everyone, Ron here from L.T.L Tutoring Central. I hope you're having a great week and learning lots. This week I'm talking about some of the online tools that I use in my tutoring business and to some extent for my own learning as well. Because there are so many resources out there, it's sometimes difficult to narrow them down. So I thought it might be a great idea just to let you know what I use. Also, if you're thinking of taking lessons from me, you'll have an idea of what's available with me and how we do things online. I've talked about a few of these individually in previous videos or on previous blogs. There will be a blog for this as well. I'll put the link below, as well as the link to the website. And also don't forget about the read-along series. I'll mention that a little bit more at the end too. So one of the main tools I use is Zoom. Everyone's probably heard of Zoom by now because of COVID-19. A lot of people have been using Zoom to meet with their families or friends or to do work online. So Zoom has become quite popular. There are other ways of getting video and speaking with people online. Skype is one that I used to use and it's still available. And there are others as well, but I have stuck with Zoom for that purpose. So I can see my students and talk to them, and they can also see me, and we can talk almost like we're in person. The other major platform I use is BitPaper. I use that for my white paper or my whiteboard, and that is a tool in which we can write together, we can type on it, we can draw on it. I can upload assignments. Students can annotate them. They can underline sections or circle answers, for example. They can also highlight. And we can discuss. Now what I do is I use Zoom for video and then just bring up BitPaper, and we use them both at the same time. So they're using BitPaper as the whiteboard and Zoom for the video and speaking. Zoom has availability for that too, I believe, but I don't use that. I find it better to use Zoom for that. So BitPaper is a really, really good resource. It has a few little I wouldn't call them flaws, but it's a little bit more difficult to type there if you're looking for spell check and things. But I like that because in that way I can see whether the student can spell the words without using computer support. So that, in a way, that's a good thing. For reading texts, for reading and reading comprehension, and also for writing ideas, questions, I use CommonLit. A lot. CommonLit has some really good text resources, stories, poems, and nonfiction texts. You can sort by grade level, you can sort by L.T.L level, and you can look at genre. There's many different ways that you can search for texts and find something suitable for your student, for your learner. And you don't have to follow the grade necessarily. So if I have a grade 9 student who is reading at a grade 6 level, I can look at the grade 6 texts and we can use that. And it doesn't really matter, because even if I have a grade 12 student who is working at a grade 12 level, we can look at a lower level text, a grade 6 text, or any text really. But my expectations for the writing portion will be much higher. So you don't have to worry too much about that, but it's great to be able to search for grade level and L.T.L level, for example. Another one is ReadWorks, that has a lot of good text and stories. East of the Web is good for, or East of Web, I think it is actually, is good for short stories. I've put the links for this in the blog, so if you want to look, or the addresses for these in the blog. So East of Web is good. It has a large collection of short stories, and some of them have questions available with them, but I often make up my own questions if I'm using those ones, because many of them don't have questions, or the questions are not the type of questions that I would like. I should mention with CommonLit, you can read the stories for free. And that is also the one I'm using for the read-along program. I'm actually going to use several, but we've started with CommonLit. And I also have a series based on CommonLit, a literature series. If you want to do that, just get in touch by email. If you want to use The other resources, the multiple choice questions and the highlighter and have it read to you, etc., you do need to register, and so that makes it slightly more complicated. But not if you take courses from me, because obviously I put you in as a student and it's free for you to use with me. Gutenberg is good for older books because they post, and they have thousands, thousands of books there that the copyright has run out in the US. So there's a lot of literature there. There's a lot of text there that you can use for free. Most of these are free or almost free. Now, some of them you have limited access to the tools, as I mentioned with CommonLit, if you don't register or if you don't pay some fee, but most of them are relatively small fees. If you take courses from me, you obviously, I do charge for the courses, but then you don't pay extra for these resources to use them when you're doing my lessons. Raz Kids I use for the younger set, younger students. There's lots and lots of stories there. They have lots of colorful pictures. We read them usually together, and then they have quizzes as well, a multiple choice quiz that the student can complete. If the student is working on his or her own, they can have this story read to them, which can be very helpful, but I also like to hear the student read because I want to know and see where the difficulties are if the student is having a problem. But it's good to have that ability so that they can actually work on their own, and they get stars for reading a book, they get stars for answering questions correctly, etc. And then they can use those stars to build an avatar, and I think there's a rocket ship or spaceship too they can build. But a lot of them like to build the avatar, and they can buy things for the avatar with their stars. So it encourages them and motivates them to get more stars and to do more reading and answering the questions. Of course, I use YouTube. You're probably watching this video on YouTube. I usually make a YouTube video once a week at least, and it's a very good way of getting in touch with people around the world, and people that I don't necessarily have as students, but who might become students in the future, or who might just watch the YouTube videos and learn something from there. So it's a great way of keeping in touch, but it's also a great way of teaching, and it's a great way of learning. I learn things from YouTube videos myself if I'm unsure of something. There might be a math concept that I've forgotten or never knew. So I will sometimes do a search on YouTube and find a video that walks me through the steps. And some of them are very helpful and some of them are not. But you can click through and find ones that are. So YouTube is a very good tool both for my getting my message out to you and also for learning myself. So YouTube. CK12 is another resource that I use online at ck12.org, I believe. And it has a lot of lessons for math and science. There's a few other topics too, but I use it primarily for math because that's I think that's where they began, and that's the subject they have the most resources for. So they're very good for that. They walk you through step by step. They have textbooks, I think flex books, I think they're called, and you can use those online, or you can print and use some of the exercises offline. I've done both. Right now, because of COVID, everyone is online. All my students are online, and so I use all of these resources online, of course. IXL is another one that I use. It has many great English and math topics, and they are set up by grade level as well. So you can choose which grade level. You can also do a search for a particular concept. In math, for example, you could search up fractions and see what's available. So I use that one quite a lot, especially online. Actually, I think I've only used, it's really only useful for online, I believe. But it is very good because they're relatively short lessons, and you can set it up very quickly and use it with your student, or if you're teaching yourself, you can practice yourself and go through the lessons. When you reach 100, you've conquered that section, but you can always redo it or practice more questions from there if you need to, or to refresh your memory. You know, if you're doing something in math and there's a test coming up or an exam, you might go back to some of the units you've already done and just refresh your memory and go through the steps again. It also explains, if you make a mistake down below, it will explain what you did wrong, or not really what you did wrong, but we'll show you the steps and how to come up with the correct answer. So that can be very helpful for self-teaching as well, and some students are very good at doing that. I also use Google Drive. If I'm, for example, if we use CommonLit or ReadWorks or some other resource to read a book or a text, and sometimes I actually post excuse me, stories that I have that are available that are not copywritten online. If the student reads the text and then I have a set of questions, or I want them to write an essay or some other assignment, a synopsis, then I can send that assignment in Google Drive, and then they can open it up as a Google Doc and they can type in there. In this way, I can see in between sessions, I can see how they're doing. I can put notes or comments to help them moving forward, and they can work in between sessions. They can just open up the Google Doc and do the work when they have the time to do so. So that's also very useful for all of my students, but particularly those in other countries, because our times don't always match very well. What might be a great time for me might be 3 o'clock in the morning for them, or vice versa. So it's a great way of being able to do lessons in your own time, and yet we can both see them. And actually, when I do meet with students on video, on Zoom, for example, we'll open up that Google Doc. If we both have it open, I can see that they are there, they can see I'm there, and we can both work on it at exactly the same time. It's like a whiteboard in bit paper. Except, of course, with the Google Doc, you do have the computer resources to help with spell check and lots of other tools that you would normally have on your word processor, whichever one you use. So Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Classroom I use in a much more limited way. I was using it more, but I find that it hasn't been all that useful for my purposes. It's probably much more useful for teachers or tutors maybe who have large groups. I normally am working one-on-one with my students, so it's not as useful for me, although I do use it a little bit. I use other resources as well. This is definitely not an exhaustive list of what's available, and it's not even an exhaustive list of what I use, but it's the main list. It's the primary list. This is what I'm using almost every day. I will probably use most of these today with my students. So these are the ones that I use quite often. So I hope you'll check some of them out. Of course, if you're interested, you can take a course from me, and then you'll get to see how to use them. I'll show you how to use them. Also, don't forget that next week is the first read-along discussion video. I'll be making that one, I believe, on Tuesday, probably posting it on Thursday. If you're interested in the read-along series, I'm just checking my notes here. If you want to take part, check out the listening text video that I made last week. So it's called Listening Text Number 1. So check that out for the read-along, and you can listen to me read the text on that particular video, and it'll also give you the link so you can access the text and read it for yourself. And then if you want to take part, just send me an email message with read-along in the message. You can send me more than that if you want, but if it's in there, then I'll know you want to take part, and I'll send you an invitation for the speaking video that I'll be making on Tuesday afternoon our time. That's it for today, I believe. So there's a good little list. Let me know what you use or what you like to use when you're teaching online or when you're learning online, because there's lots of resources out there. I've checked out some that are probably very useful for others. They don't work for me, or I don't think they'd work for me. Some of them I've tested. Some of them I've just looked at them and I thought, not really for me. But what will work for one person won't necessarily for another. But I'm sure there's some that would work well for me that I haven't discovered yet. So let me know what works for you. In the meantime, have fun, keep learning, and I shall see you later. It's Ron Johnson from L.T.L Tutoring Central. Bye-bye for now.